I'd like to share a story of how I began, unravel the illusion, discover who I am, and in the end you'll have conversations with your best friend. And in the end you'll have conversations with your best friend. And in the end you'll have conversations with your best friend. And in the end you'll have conversations with your best friend. Hey there. Conversations with Your Best Friend, a no self-help book about all the things our parents didn't teach us. Book 1, written by Yoshua. Do not try and read this book. That would be absolutely impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth. There is no book. In doing so, you'll see that it is not the book that gets read, it is yourself. Okay, we got the whole table of contents thing. You don't need to know about that. This book was written for and is dedicated to you. All right, here we go. Before we begin, let's play a game. In grade school, I possessed a very poor vocabulary, and my grammar skills sucked at best. Paul, a brown-haired, 5'9", fairly athletic-built student that looked not unlike a wise owl that I went to school with, seemed to be rather smart. He knew the definition and meaning of just about every word in the dictionary, and I always envied him for it. In fact, he knew words so well, he'd often raise his hand in class to correct our teacher for her misuse and misspelling of specific words. Needless to say, she was not a big fan of that, which, infuriated her more as the other kids were laughing and kind of being silly. Since my vocabulary was rather arrested in the most basic of ways, I always felt inferior to many of the kids in my class, especially Paul. I couldn't speak nearly as eloquently, a huge word I wouldn't have dared use back then, as most of the kids that I went to school with, and rather quickly I decided I must be dumb and would never amount to much of anything as far as general intelligence goes. I held on to that valuation of dumb that I branded in hot coals on the inside of my mind for a large portion of my life. This label clouded most of the things that I believed and thought about myself, lowering my self-esteem to a shriveled up raisin, not even the good golden kind, the crappy kind you find in a cheap gas station bag of trail mix. To my great misfortune, I labeled myself in a category that kept me feeling small in almost every situation I wound up in. On top of that, I was diagnosed with ADHD and placed on medication at the age of 9 for having a learning disability, which only added to my ever-growing list of reasons I felt flat out stupid. My learning was disabled? What in the actual fuck does that mean? You can imagine what I made it mean. What's more, had I known at the time that all words, and thus their meanings, were made up, and that most people I knew were only playing pretend in life, I may have felt entirely different. But alas, we have one of the great riddles of life. When I first came to the staggering realization that all words were made up, as you may have yourself, or maybe discovering at this very moment, or maybe saying, duh, Captain Obvious, I was dumbfounded. I was perplexed, confused, and I was also relieved at the same time. This profound, or so I thought at the time, discovery didn't come so simple to me, but when it did, I would never read a single thing quite the same again. As I began to see, it wasn't so much the words in and of themselves that were the problem, but rather the way I used them to create a story where I would constantly tell myself about how I was dumb, and thus less than, for not knowing all these words. I held on to that belief for damn near 20 years, and boy did it mess me up. Reading and writing were extremely arduous tasks for me in school. I hardly read a single book until the age of 19, when I was over a year into college. While I did technically read before this moment, I strongly despise reading. I always thought movies were way better and could never make it through an entire book, let alone a chapter or page, without drifting into a daydream, rereading sentence after sentence with almost no retention. I relied on spark notes and summaries to get through grade school, and never found myself immersed in a single collection of words, always dreading summer reading like the frickin' plague. One day, to my surprise, that all drastically changed. I fell into a deep love affair with books after a college English class my sophomore year, where I was assigned to read 1984 by George Orwell. I didn't finish the book at the time, though I have gone back and reread it twice, as it is so good, and just a note, it is mind-blowingly good, however dark. But it was really my first glimpse at the power of the magic of writing and words and all that stuff. Basically, after this whole magic and discovering of how wonderful books were, I decided to try and read a book for fun, and I picked up the Da Vinci Code, which I devoured in a few days, followed by the fourth Harry Potter book, Goblet of Fire, also devoured in lieu of studying for a final, and the rest was history. The more I fell into a deep love with books, the more I yearned to understand those big and impressive words that had always made me feel so small. When my love for reading finally did come to fruition, I couldn't get enough. I was turning into a book junkie, needing a continual fix of the good stuff, and found myself lost in books for days at a time. To make sure I was getting the most out of my experience, I kept the dictionary close by to decipher all those great mysterious words that always plagued me into inferiority in my earlier years. My dictionary may have been of the electronic kind on my phone, but it seemed to grant me limitless access to a whole new world of words and wonder. It wouldn't be until a few years into my journey, as reading and then writing found a permanent place deep within my heart, that I would discover something so obvious yet elusive that it would rock my world forever. And so I ask, would you like to play a game? The game is simple, and the rules will reveal themselves as you play the game. Yeah? Let's do this thing. To start, pick a word. A verb or an adjective works well. A word that you've always admired, appreciated, or had some kind of interest in. Something that you're fairly certain you know the definition of, but if you were to be asked to confirm the textbook meaning, you might have to look it up. Heck, it could be the word admire. I'll use admire. So let's look at admire. Admire. Regard with respect or warm approval. Upon reading this definition, I can think of what I know of the word admire and come to the conclusion that I agree with what I have read and move on with my life. Simple enough? But wait, aren't we playing some kind of game? The game that I started playing with myself, the game that would ultimately unravel a key mystery about words for me, came when I realized I didn't know what some of the words in the definition of the very word I was looking up meant, thus also having to look them up. When I look at the above definition, two words that stand out are respect and approval. Of course I know what they are, but do I know the exact definition of it? No, so let's check it out. Approve. Officially agree to or accept as satisfactory. Seems harmless enough. If I approve of something, it makes sense that I would agree or accept that thing. But what about respect? Respect. A feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements. Aha! If part of the definition for admire is to regard with respect, and part of the definition of respect is a feeling of deep admiration, what the heck does that tell us? The conclusion that shifted my entire world of words for me in that very instance became ever so clear. As I briefly mentioned earlier, all words are made up, but there's more to the story than that. Meaning simply rests on the meaning of other words. There's no one, end-all be-all word that explains another without another explaining it. It goes round and round in a big circle. So that was the game I started to play. Think of a word, look up the definition of that word, and keep searching the word within until you find the definition and you get back to where you started. What was once so confusing became utterly plain and clear. Sure, it may be obvious that language and words are made up, but the piece that was missing was this. We create our own meaning in so much as we use language to define meaning. It's not that words are not lovely. I appreciate language. It has a lot of value in many ways. but language as an attempt to explain and communicate how we feel, what we believe, what our needs are, and what the heck is really going on in this world is not always the most reliable means of communication and is often misinterpreted. To further this concept, I will include a variety of textbook definitions to common words throughout these pages as a starting point for you to unravel their very nature. Without the right key for the lock, it's obvious that we can't open the door we are trying to go through. But when it comes to understanding the world around us and getting a clear grasp on information, it's not always so obvious. What if the information we were given was wrong? What if everything we were taught was based on miscommunicated definitions and beliefs? Chances are, if you're here, then you've had a similar feeling. Something just isn't quite right about life, and the life that you were living, and just all the things that you were taught just don't really add up. Imagine for a moment that some of your most precious beliefs, some of the very basic ideas, ideals, and morals that you've lived your life by were complete and utter lies. Maybe these thoughts came from you, or perhaps you learned them elsewhere. Things such as, take a safe career path. God is judging you. The world is a scary place. Your dreams are unreasonable. Every man for himself. They're all going to laugh at you. And fear the man. The list just goes on and on. Most people spend their entire lives believing things and making choices that they think are of their own volition, when in truth they are simply programmed ideas from past fears and judgments. I'm not saying this to challenge you in your beliefs, nor do I have an interest in having a pissing match to see who can dominate the conversation with their impressive facts and thoughts on the matter, but I do bring this up for a very specific reason. If you have strong beliefs, thoughts, and ideas that seem to make sense to you, great. Do as you please with them. I'm not here to stroke the ego, to convince you of anything, only to get you to start to look at the parts of you that don't feel so good. Just as a doctor might diagnose and attempt to cure a physical ailment or sickness you're experiencing, they wouldn't first look at the parts of you that felt good and search for a cure. Rather, they'd most likely go right to the heart of the problem and work backwards or forwards from there. Although I haven't been to a doctor in quite a long time, so what the heck do I know? Ideas and opinions are the dominant life force of our planet. Opinions toppled on thoughts, buried by beliefs, compounded by ideas. A man here and there believing what they have to say is right, and oftentimes fighting for what they are so sure they know to be true. But what happens when you suddenly start to see the cracks? Start to see that what you were told to believe might not be true. It's easy to hold on to our beliefs, to cling to them like a safety raft in a shitstorm of doubt, but as you may have come to see, our beliefs keep us feeling safe until they don't. Conversations with your best friend isn't a book about philosophy, dogma, religion, nor is it a toolbox of practices for you to follow rigorously. This book is not to be used as a definitive set of rules for a specific way of being, but rather to unravel your way of being. To pull on that loose thread dangling from the depths of your metaphorical, or so very real depending on what you believe, soul. When I took a moment to pause the distractions and dig into my life, I couldn't stop myself from pulling that tiny little thread, piercing its head out from underneath my entire being. Like the layers of an onion, when you peel back each layer, you only find another layer until there is no more onion. And you probably also cry a lot. When you take a moment to look honestly into your life, what string is loose? What part of you needs to unravel in order to unveil who you truly are? When I started pulling, I couldn't stop. Sure, I tried many times. Even tried to cut off the piece that was hanging out, just as I have on many pieces of clothing. But at the end of the day, I knew it was already coming undone. That all that held up my belief system was a complex, interwoven structure of varying design, built on fear, meant to make me believe I was standing on solid ground. It is that tiny little thread sticking out that seems so small and insignificant at first, but is the beginning of the entire makeup of our identity. And the moment we see it and start to tug, the bigger the end we are pulling on gets, until we have no defined structure left. Just as an undefined piece of string ready to be turned into something new. Just an undefined piece of string. Once you see the false reality that makes up you, it can be quite challenging to stop seeing it. From my experience, until you've gotten to the core of who you really are, you'll always be moving forward, discovering something new with each dissolving layer. Chances are, if you're here reading this, then you already know what I'm talking about. Have you ever had a piece of jewelry, rope, or heck, a guitar cord that seemed so tangled that it would be almost impossible to unravel? As a kid, girls would always bring me their tangled necklaces because they knew I loved untangling knots. Each time, without fail, I would untangle what once seemed like a lost mess and make it whole again. Every time, no matter how complex, hopeless, or out of whack a chain, bracelet, or necklace was, I would always come to find that after some dedicated patience at the beginning, it would always hit a point where everything would easily unfold. You see, no matter how complex your life seems to be, at the end of the day, it isn't all that much different from that chain or rope or long, thin thread, a structured facade with a most basic nature. I'm still fascinated with my clothing and knowing that no matter how solid or unified any one piece seems to be, when I look closely enough, each pair of pants, shirt, or jacket is constructed of something so simple and rudimentary, a long, thin piece of fabric woven in a way that gives it the appearance that it's more than it seems, that it is solid when in fact it is formless. And so it is this book's only designed to unravel your seemingly solid structure, to aid in showing you what your original thread really looks like. You can think of it like a sort of tearing down of the house, destroying piece by piece the building blocks of your life that were built on a weak foundation, so that you can build up a new one by the universe's perfect design, not the fears and past conditions of others who didn't know any better. It's not their fault, but we are complex beings. There's no question about that. But it is through the guiding light of truth, our ability to release control, and a thirst for stopping at nothing until we've seen what is real, that we can unlock the infinitely absurd puzzle that is our supposed self. Once I cleared out what didn't serve me anymore, and damn near if it ever did, I started to see a clear picture of what life actually was. Not one where we get stuck in a system, told that we can't do things, aren't good enough, or that we need to take certain pills for the rest of our lives if we want any chance at being normal, but an entirely different paradigm altogether. And from there, I was able to see clearly that none of my beliefs, however convincing, were true, and that I had been living as a false representation of myself, not in divine alignment with all that is. That sounds pretty cool, right? Divine alignment with all that is, I think I'll take it. False, fake world, If I hadn't taken the journey from that world to the one I now reside in, where life makes perfect sense, I wouldn't be writing about it, maybe only guessing, but I've lived it all firsthand. Changed my condition from fear to trust, rid myself of the ADHD label, the depression, figured out, healed my mind and body from various ailments and sicknesses without the things I was told I needed, faced my greatest fears, and discovered who I actually was. Which, lucky me, is nothing at all. At the end of the day, I am no more than a reflection of you. Someone that has been where you are, that has taken a good hard look at life and made sense of what previously seemed senseless. When I stripped away the facade, let go of the ego, detached from the false character I once spent so much energy trying to hold up, I was left only with truth and my direct connection to everything. Consider me a friend that is simply here to show you what is possible when you live life beyond the veil of fear and exist in truth. And so, as we begin, I ask you to take a moment to consider, what do you know beyond a shadow of a doubt to be true? Most of the stories, people, and details henceforth have been slightly altered to hide the identity of certain individuals, although what really is identity anyway?